Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. My name is Kirsten Green. I'm the Executive Director of the Retired Racehorse Project. This month in February is Aftercare Industry Month. It's our second go around with this, and we'd like to thank the Thoroughbred Education and Research Foundation for their grant that funded this series of webinars. So what Aftercare Industry Month is a weekly webinar series in the month of February to cover all kinds of topics that are relevant to people that are working in the aftercare space. And we do that regardless. They're focused on anybody of any tax status, because we at RRP feel pretty strongly that aftercare is happening in a kind of spectrum and variety of ways. And how that gets done is not as critical as making sure that we're doing right by the horses. So we just want to take some time, particularly this evening, to highlight programs that I don't think get as much credit as they should, which is in-house aftercare programs. So these are breeders or racing stables that have established their own aftercare programs underneath or adjacent to the kind of existing business structure that they have. We have 3 more sessions this month. Next Monday, the 10th, for Valentine's Day, is Thoroughbred matchmaking. Thursday, the 20th, is going to be From Passion to Prosperity, Founding and Funding Your Nonprofit. So if you've been thinking about going the nonprofit route in the aftercare industry, that'll be a really good one just to answer questions about generally starting an aftercare or a nonprofit aftercare organization and getting that kind of critical startup funding. And then our last session will be February 27th, also a Thursday, and that one is going to be There's No Place Like Home, Finding Your Long-Term Property. So that'll be a good one to attend as well. Those are all at 7 p.m. Eastern. Quick housekeeping note, this is a Zoom webinar and not a Zoom meeting, so we can only see the panelists. And if you need to communicate a question, which is absolutely encouraged, we love questions, please use the Q&A function or the chat function. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists and ask them just to take a moment to talk about their history in the racing industry and how it was that they became involved in or started or decided to implement an aftercare like segment of their business. And I'll start with Katelyn, because Katelyn is part of a very large global organization, and she is part of this and necessary and has not been around as long as Godolphin has, like alternatively in the case of our other panelists who founded their business themselves. So I'm going to ask Katelyn to go ahead and introduce herself and talk a little bit about Godolphin Lifetime Care.
I'm Katelyn. I got into horses in general when I was younger. I am a first generation horse person. So I come from a family that still has no idea what I'm doing here in Kentucky. But I moved to Lexington to attend the University of Kentucky. I studied and graduated with an equine science degree in 2021. And 2020 is when I started my journey with Godolphin, which is actually my first journey and experience in the thoroughbred industry. I started at their yearling farm out in Paris, Kentucky, kind of moved around. I wanted to learn as much as I could until I got into the office. And as Kirsten alluded to, the company obviously has existed for many, many more years than I have been here. So there has been a bunch of amazing people before me who have kind of created the Lifetime Care program and have made it what it is today. But I have been the representative of Godolphin Lifetime Care for the past about year and a half. And it's been awesome. And it's been really fun, and it's just a great program and organization that is actually global for us. So it is called Godolphin Lifetime Care in all of the countries that Godolphin exists in. And it gets to rehome and place a bunch of horses each year.
Thank you, Katelyn. Michele, if you could tell us a little bit about Wasabi Aftercare Fund.
Sure. So I'm Michele, and I am very new to the horse world. my husband and I formed Wasabi Venture Stables in 2016. And honestly, before then, I really did not have many interactions with horses, but I'm a lifelong animal person. So anything with feathers, fins, fur, I like to nurture it. And so once we built this racing stable, I just realized, okay, horses are these amazing creatures. And as we grew from a racing stable to a breeding operation as well, and I became more knowledgeable in this industry, I realized we needed to be responsible for the aftercare of our horses. And so in 2021, I formed Wasabi Aftercare as a corporation and filed for our 501c3, having really been working on it for a couple of years without having a title. And now, I track every horse we breed and or race. At basically anything that touches one of our barns, I have eyes on. And up to and through retirement.
Great. I remember meeting with you a couple of years ago when you were kind of getting started in earnest with this, and I was really impressed with how diligent you were with kind of keeping tabs on your horses and the follow-up and everything that you do. It's no mean feat trying to keep track of these horses. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
And Carrie, if you could tell us a little bit about Machmer Hall.
Sure. I was born into the industry. My parents are both veterinarians. We had a farm in Virginia called Paradox Farm where we stood the stallion Clem that we had bought when I was a kid off Calumet, off Claiborne in one of the dispersals. And we had a farm in Virginia. And then my dad wanted warmer weather. So then we moved to Ocala and we had this amazing 200-acre farm literally on 40, right in the center of Ocala, called TERF Farm. But I remember as a kid, and the whole time I was a kid growing up with the thoroughbreds, I was showing ponies and riding, and I was kind of oblivious to all the whole thoroughbred thing, but I did enjoy all the horse show thing. So then my parents got divorced and liquidated all of the thoroughbreds, moved back up to Virginia, and my mom slowly started getting back into it. And then I was still riding some, then went to college, came back, and then she really got back into thoroughbreds. And then I moved to the Lexington area, Paris, Kentucky in 2001. And we're way less formal. I do not have a 501c. I do not have, like I told them, I do not have an adoption contract. For us, it's been kind of that bridge that always happened. Like when I was growing up, everyone rode thoroughbreds. Now everyone rides warm bloods, and my daughter has 2 warm bloods. And so for me, I realized early on that the bridge between the trainers and the people that wanted the riding horses, that was one of the biggest problems. So we just started becoming known even before you could sell an OTTB for decent money, unlike now, thanks to RRP and TIP. We were literally just the go-between between picking them up and getting them placed in homes, just because I knew show hunter people and the trainers did not. And I think the good thing is in the past couple of decades, that's really, the communication has changed a lot.
Great. I think that kind of goes well with kind of my first question here. And how does your aftercare program really kind of interface with the parent operation? So, Michele is the one that chose to go the nonprofit route. Carrie chosen not to do that and not be as formal, and everybody has, there's no wrong way to aftercare, really, right? And as long as it is something that takes the horse's best interest into heart and is doing the networking and is getting them placed into appropriate homes and hopefully proactively and in a timely way, like who cares what the tax status and organization is ultimately. But maybe Michele, since you did decide to go nonprofit, can you talk a little bit about why you decided to go that way and kind of how Wasabi Venture Stables interfaces with the Aftercare Fund and kind of what the transition looks like in between the two?
Sure. So the driving force for me to go the nonprofit route was that we were 100% donation funded. And so we have club members who every time they purchase a horse or just want to give make donations to the Aftercare Fund. And so before I started it, people were providing money like when a horse retired. But I figured if I made it into a charitable donation, it would probably increase donations. And so at the end of the year, people, even if all they ever do that year, even if they don't make a direct donation, but they buy 10 horses, and with every horse they donate $5, at the end of the year, they get a receipt that they made a $50 donation to the Aftercare Fund. So it was truly in hopes of being able to increase donations, which it definitely has. And then the relationship with Wasabi Ventures, I track all the horses, and the money is kept separate. As when people make their purchases, we track all of their donations in our software, and then quarterly we make transfers of that money from stables to the aftercare program, with the people getting credit, not stables. They were just like a holding source for it. And there's a little bit of conversation in there, you know, when it's time to retire a horse, if the horse is still running under the Wasabi stables silks. But I also will privately purchase horses or assist in the retirement of horses who've been acclaimed away from us or who we bred and sold at auction. And so that is 100% a separate transaction. But like last fall, we retired one of our horses, Benny Bengo, and it was just time. He was running well, but not at the level he had been. And so Wasabi makes the decision with our trainers and us, and then it becomes a project for me to find the right placement for him.
And I think what's unique here a little bit as well is, like, yes, you guys race your horses, you do have your own horses that you breed as well, and you're also a racing syndicate. And that's been kind of acknowledged as a way that we can bring a lot of people into this industry and get involved in horse racing in a way that is accessible for people and really kind of hopefully grow engagement with racing. Can you talk a little bit about how your owners, like you described that they make a donation when they purchase a horse, but how do your donors or your owners, sorry, kind of interface with the aftercare piece? Like, are they very curious and want like what happens when the horse retires? Like, do they get little newsletters or updates, and what does that look like?
I think one of the strengths of Wasabi, and both the stable side and the aftercare side, is our communication. We use Slack as a tool, and we must have hundreds of channels for, you know, horses that you own, but then I have channels that are for our former active horses. So every horse that used to be in our barn that is still running, I announce when they're racing and the results of their race. We have a former retired horses channel where, like just the other day, a horse we have whose name's Sevilla Sangria, she's been retired for a few years, an update from her owner on how she's doing. So we have that. I send out monthly newsletters to my donors twice a month. And we're on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and we have a website too. So there's quite a bit of information out there. And what I think is pretty amazing is, so when people buy into our horses, I only ask for a $5 donation. I've thought of increasing it, but what I find interesting is that it is a checkbox. I'd say 98% of our club members, when they make a purchase, will donate to the aftercare fund. And it's really nice to see this support across the board, that they believe that the important thing is to care for the horse when their racing career is done.
It's great to hear. Okay. Katelyn, can you tell me a little bit about with Godolphin, you're servicing exclusively horses that were raced or bred by Godolphin stables. So when a horse enters into the program, what does it look like? Is it, I know that Godolphin works with several different trainers throughout North America. How do you interface with them? And like, is there a particular farm that they go to? Do they go up on a website? Like, what does the process look like?
Sure. Our rehoming program is comprised entirely of geldings. So all of our fillies or mares that retire from our racing stable go back to one of our farms, and they will just join the broodmare band. as far as the geldings go, we have weekly chats with our trainers. So that's how we really stay on top of all of our horses in training, which is great, especially when it can be, 150 horses at a time in training. So when a horse has been deemed, in the rehoming program, they come back to our resident trainer, who is amazing. His name is Johnny Burke. He has a permanent spot at Keeneland there off of Rice Road. And they will always go back into him. And from there, he evaluates them. If a vet needs, a vet will always have a look at them. But obviously, some horses are retiring with specific injuries that need some rehab or potentially a surgery or a treatment. So all of that will happen there with Johnny, as well as updated vaccinations. They're going to get their teeth done, they're going to get their feet done, they're just going to have a full little makeover. When they are able to be on turnout, they come back to our farm in Lexington, called Jonabell, which is actually where our stallions are held as well. So that is kind of our base for all of our horses in our rehoming program. And, whether they can be turned out in a paddock by themselves or they can be on field turnout with their other buddies in the rehoming program, they will. And they will always, be given an ample amount of time to just kind of decompress and make sure they're good to go before they're eligible to be rehomed. So really, the final kind of check is done by our vet on the farm. And if he's like, yep, this horse can, very easily move into a second career, at that point, we don't post them anywhere. There's not a website or anything. We do just have, we call it a wait list of people. But really, it's just a list of really great contacts that we have. Different people who can, I think I've mentioned before, we don't have a retraining facility, meaning these horses are truly off the track thoroughbreds. They don't have any retraining. We don't have the arena. We don't have the things to do that. So we reach out to, we have a handful of contacts that we love and we trust, and they're really great, and they can just get these horses started off on the right foot in their second careers.
Okay. All right. And Carrie, can you tell me a little bit about which horses you serve in the aftercare division of Machmer Hall and kind of how that figures into how you operate your business overall?
Well, while I'm talking to you, I have a mare colicking in the clinic. What should we do? Surgery, this and that. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is just typical of horses. Anyway, we really have an open door policy. If we have space, I will take them. We have taken some that have needed year-long layoffs. A lot of times, if they're kind geldings, what we'll do is we will use them as babysitters in the colt field while they rehab. And then after they come through a season, we'll assess them. And it's amazing what Mother Nature and time will do, time and turnout. I mean, we had one, he was a stakes winner, came to us and he had a sesamoid fractured in half. And I can't believe it. But after your turnout, he's a full-time hunt horse now. So he just needed a lot of time. So we do not have any personal limitations in what we take. Every sound OTTB has a home, period. I can place 15 one-hand cribbing sound fillies, and we can place 16 two-hand. I mean, as long as they're not lunatics and they're sound, there is a place for them. And so we do have an open door. It's mostly word of mouth. And then Katelyn Yellow, who does all the breaking at Juddmonte, which is another big farm, just like Darley. She actually runs our entire OTTB division. And she was actually my daughter's first riding horse trainer here in Lexington. So I think it's really, for what we do, it's just the time, and my mom allows us to, basically we pick up the tabs on all of them. A lot of the horses, we even pay for the van, the shipping here and there. And it's because it's more emotionally rewarding than anything. And So I just love it, and Katelyn loves it. And, I mean, we sell the horses from between $1,500 and the stunning, amazing ones will bring $5,000, but that doesn't even come close to. I mean, the day rates, the break-even day rates in most thoroughbred farms are like $45 a day. So it's a labor of love, but we do not put restrictions on anything we take. Now, I do have people sometimes call me with catastrophic injuries, and sometimes they just need to hear that it's the right thing to do to not move forward and to kindly euthanize the horse. And I think that that is one of the things I can say in a kindly manner without with realizing that sometimes that needs to be said. Sometimes you can't save everything, and that's part of our program too.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to touch on. And, I kind of have like a list jotted down of like, what does administration look like? And one of the key things that goes into accreditation for like a TAA accredited program is being able to demonstrate that you do have a euthanasia policy. So, since we're on the topic out the gate here, can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like in your respective programs? So if you have a horse where, they're just mentally are not in a great space and are unlikely to be in a great space, or if there is a soundness issue that is, just not going to be productive for that horse, like what does your evaluative process look like for that? If you have any points that you want to add on to what you were saying, Carrie, or either of you guys have anything you want to add?
Well, for us, we actually did we just 2 months ago decided to euthanize one. And it was a 2-year-old who came in to me from one of the farms that we're good friends with. We kept him 6 months. So what he had is he had fractured his sesamoid badly off the farm, and he also had a club foot, and he was also a cribber, and he was also windy. So it was all of these things, and it just wasn't, it was a culmination of all these problems. And Katelyn and I had several discussions, waiting, seeing if the farrier could help the club foot. And it just, so that was the rare instance where, he wasn't sound on the ankle, plus. Personally, I've never had one where mentally them being turned out, becoming couch potatoes. I mean, I've had horses come to me with warnings and be careful, he'll attack you in the stall. And it's amazing what a little snip, gelding, and even just putting them out. Once they become, literally couch potatoes, I think a lot of their mentality completely changes.
Anything to add on that, Katelyn or Michele?
I haven't had any attempted to be retired that were in that place. I'm sure that day will come. And I've seen it enough through our breeding operations that sometimes that is the right decision to make. But I have not directly had to have that conversation yet at a retirement.
We would be very similar to Carrie, that it's definitely a team decision. We would do everything we possibly could, given the time, obviously any type of rehab or treatments that would be recommended. But sometimes it's not enough. And if our vet says, as far as a pain-free life for that animal, it's just not in the cards. Like, that's not fair. So I think at that point, it's never an easy decision, obviously. But you just have to. And I would agree with Carrie. We fortunately have not had one because of mental reasons needed to be humanely euthanized. Again, a lot of turnout time, and to kind of be, we've seen, these geldings that have been living a life on the racetrack. You put them out with some friends for a few months and they kind of just turn right around.
Yeah. Okay. So in a day to day or a week to week, how much time do you think in your kind of personal scope of responsibilities do you dedicate to aftercare? Why?
I kind of jotted down, I would say on a day-to-day basis, around, 1 to 3 hours. And definitely there are days where I don't do much at all with our lifetime care program, depending on if we have horses on the farm at the moment available. It just kind of depends on the time of year. But definitely, every other week I am reaching out to different new owners and riders and just checking in, as well as the horses we do have on the farm, making sure vaccinations are up to date, making sure their feet are getting trimmed, the whole lot there. So there's yeah, it definitely varies, but there's a lot of administrative stuff to do, as well as just kind of keeping up with the horses that we do have out there, and if we have any on the farms, trying to get people out to come look at them.
I'd say for me, it's about half of my work week. Because I'm watching all the races of horses we own, horses we use that we've bred, horses that were claimed away from us. And then I'm a spreadsheet person, so I have, I don't know, way too many, but I have a spreadsheet that's called inactive horses, and it's horses, well, they're not even active, it's unknown that, they were racing and their trainer or owner has not communicated with me, and I spend time every month like Googling for these horses. And the crazy thing is, just the other month, I found a horse who hasn't been active in 4 years, and I must have just used one different keyword. And I found a horse via Reddit that he's been retired and he's someone's riding horse. I mean, so I put time into things like that. And then in addition to our tracking our horses, I really try to educate the public about aftercare. So every month I interview other aftercare groups. Like last month, I spoke with Lisa at Rerun and put an article up. And then something new I'm doing is starting to promote other groups that are doing aftercare work, to kind of get it out there that there are quite a few racing syndicates that are in some form or fashion looking at aftercare. So I've turned it into a bigger role than maybe I thought it would be, but it does take up, but I tell people it's the best job ever, because not only do I do that, but I'm in communication with a number of our owners, of our retirees. And when I talk to them, every single one of them tells me they have the best horse ever. And I'm like, well, there are 99 other of you, but that's okay, because I would rather that every person thinks that their horse is the best ever. And I get these great stories, and I reach out to people at least once a year to check in to see how they're doing. So.
I think for us, it's just all relative to how many horses that we have versus not have. I'm on social media a lot, and I think a lot of the horses get placed that way. But I kind of, because my daughter does the show hunter world, I'm kind of always in flux in between the race world and the riding world. And, I'll put in as many hours as it needs, but at the same point, it is a very ebb and flow position, what we do with ours.
You have a bit of volume to your business. Do you feel like, you say ebb and flow, do you see kind of like seasonal kind of spikes or anything like that, like in between race meets and that sort of thing? Or is it really just kind of, there's no rhyme or reason to it?
I'm sure there is definitely some between with the race meets closing and the cheaper claimers. The last two we got were like that, where the owner's like, well, we're going to run them a couple more times, but we don't want to carry them for the winter. So is it okay if y'all take them? Yeah. So I definitely think that you get that. The greatest thing about all the horses that we get from either trainers or owners, they all care. They care enough to call us and say, hey, can I ship them to you, or can you pick them up? So they are completely aware of the want and the desire for the horses to have soft landings. So I think that that's a luxury that we have compared to some of these other horses that I see on, bad situations that owners maybe weren't as responsible with.
Um, so how about some administrative questions here? So, do you transfer ownership? Do you do the retired from racing form with the jockey club? And do you have a contract or a bill of sale? So we've kind of touched on this briefly with each of you, but I think your policies and procedures might look a little bit different. So can you tell me about that? How about Katelyn?
We do officially retire them through the jockey club. As soon as they are a part of the rehoming program, we go ahead and do that. Because we do have a bill of agreement, and that is probably one of our biggest things in our bill of agreement is that that horse cannot race again. Which is why we send that into the jockey club, because then they cannot. So we do have a bill of agreement, is what we call it, because so it's not a bill of sale. We don't charge anything for our horses. We really just want them to get a great home. We also don't have any restrictions as far as reselling the horses. You're able to resell them if you want to. We do just ask you kind of keep us in the loop, and obviously always just make sure they're in good hands. So I try to keep in touch, and just, if we send it to someone and they sell them, just to then make that connection with the new owner as well. Just, like, hey, we're here, because we do have, it's Godolphin lifetime care. So we are here for their whole life. We just recently brought back in 2 22-year-old geldings that we rehomed when they were 3. They kind of bounced around. They were lesson ponies. They kind of lived 5 lives. And when they turned 20, people couldn't have the horses anymore. So we took them back. So that is always a part of our policy. And that is the most important thing that we emphasize, is that we are always here and we will always take them back. Really, no questions asked.
That's fantastic to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in the racing industry, like, the reality is like, even the most successful ones, like, that's just a portion of their lives, and hopefully, like, they were successful enough to go on and be kind of brought back into the breeding industry, but they're in most cases going to have 10, 15, 20 years to do something else. And even if they transition out into like a kind of riding equestrian world, like, even within that lifespan, there will be different kind of stages of, depending on the owner that they're with and and what the owner wants to do. Like, they're going to have days where maybe they're highly competitive to where they're kind of ramping down, or they're going to be a lesson horse and that sort of thing. And so I'm like super glad to hear that even through all of that you guys are still willing to take your horses back. That's so great.
Mm-hmm.
Michele, can you tell us a little bit about your policies and your contracting and that sort of thing?
Sure. So I think we're pretty similar to what Katelyn just said. So we always mark them as retired from racing in the jockey club. And then we have a sales agreement that, states the same thing, that they're not allowed to be raced again. And sometimes it's just simply a $1 transaction. So we do have a transaction recorded, but this is the best home for the horse. And, the meaning of the sale isn't for us to make money off of it, but it's to place the horse well. And so that agreement says that they're welcome to come back to me, to the aftercare fund, if they need to rehome, and if they do rehome on their own, again, we would ask to be notified. And I have had that happen. We have a shorter span of having been in existence, but I've had a couple people rehome and reached out to me first to let me know, and then have done introductions to the new owners, which is great, because then it makes it easier for me to continue to follow these horses.
And
Well, I think the HISA, the new HISA, the great thing is with the retired from racing option with HISA, it's very easy. Now you don't even have to jump through the hoops of the jockey club, because you just beep and it's retired from racing. And to reactivate that, you would have to jump through some hoops. So I think that is one thing that's really made it a lot simpler. Like I said before, we do not have a contract. We've actually only had one major problem in all the time I've ever retired horses. And we got a horse from a girl who, her father had raced the horse, and we had sold him as a yearling, and he had fractured something, fractured a sesamoid or whatever, something had happened, a fracture in a front ankle. And they had these x-rays, and the x-rays were like, this horse will, typical what I deal with. This horse will never be sound, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we used him for one season as a babysitter. And then after that, I'm watching the horse gallop around with all the yearlings, and I'm like, this horse looks good to me. So we x-rayed it, and his x-rays, like bones change and heal. I mean, I compound fractured my leg when I was 18 years old. And if it hadn't healed, I would not be here walking around. And I think that that's things that people don't, bones and injuries, they change a lot. So we placed this horse once, and then the girl tracked down the people we placed it to, and she told them that we'd sold her, that we were fraudulent, and we had sold her this horse. And I mean, it was a terrible experience. So then we took the horse back. Then we placed the horse again, and it went out west, and she found it again and called these people, and these people called me, I mean, it was like a $3,500 horse. And of course, God only knows how much money this, and finally I called her, I'm like, do you not understand the bones change, that even though your vet 7 months ago said that this horse would never be appropriate, that my vet, who works for Windstar and Coolmore and does all the major things, x-rayed it and it's fine. And I'm like, and she still didn't believe me. So then I said, let me send the x-rays to your vet. And her vet was like, oh, I need better angles to see the prognosis. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So anyway, so the point of all that is I ended up refunding the people their entire cost, and I said to them, when I refunded, I said, is the horse lame? No, he's not lame. I said, okay, well, are you going to believe some? And so it was a very frustrating situation, but that's a one-off for us. I will always take back anything. We just took back Eyes Wide Open, I think she's 24 now. And I'd sold her as a broodmare, and the people said she's done her, her career having foals. Would you guys be okay with taking her back? And we took her back, and she's babysitting a group of fillies at the barn now. So it's a very different, because I'm the principal and we can make these decisions, and we're not under the umbrella of a corporation or a 501c. That's why I never did it, because I didn't want to be beholden to any rules that I had to follow regarding that. And if a horse, so that's why we haven't done it in past. And we honestly have not had problems, except for that's literally once in 20 years that I can think of was a bad experience. So that's pretty amazing considering the numbers we deal with.
We have our first question, and it's all the way from New Zealand. And Lisa wants to know what HISA is. So Lisa, it could be HISA or HISA, depending on who you are. That's an acronym for Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority, which is relatively new in the scope of things here in the United States, but horses are covered by HISA during a particular phase of their racing years. So it's really just for thoroughbred racing here in the United States. And so horses are subject to all of the regulations until they are actually officially retired. So I think that's actually, I would guess or say anecdotally that that's really kind of increase some of the insight and data that we have about horses retiring, because that transaction is getting more reliably completed. As Carrie mentioned, to officially retire a horse before HISA existed, there was actually like a 2-part notarized paper form that you had to submit to the Jockey Club to officially retire a horse. And there were some other mechanisms that people would try to utilize, which might just say like writing on the horse's papers or withholding the horse's papers entirely. So the advent of HISA has actually really kind of cleaned up a lot of that and made it very cut and dry and very easy to officially retire a horse. I'm not in racing the way that these guys are. Do you have anything that you just want to add about kind of has HISA really changed very much for you in terms of, I mean, in your operations overall, but also kind of the decision making around horses and, you know, timely retirement and that sort of thing? Has it really changed much for you?
I guess I'll go first. Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
the horses are coming in sounder. I think people are, well, we can't inject it, so we might as well, I can't do it, so it's not this. I personally have seen, I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, I have horses, I'm dealing with a horse right now that got on the vet's list at Breeders' Cup that I cannot get off the vet's list, even though she's absolutely sound. And it's driving me bonkers and crazy. And I want to scream and yell. But unfortunately, it's not a perfect system, but it's definitely, in my personal opinion, a much better system.
Mhm.
And if I had to take a guess, I think that HISA is stopping a little bit of that one more race, one last race syndrome. But it's all anecdotal. Last year I did not privately purchase any horses because there were none that had gotten to that point where I was needing to ask a trainer, hey, instead of running this horse, for $4,000 again, could I buy it off of you? But I don't, that's 1 year, right? It could have just been a fluke. And but I do feel like, or I'm hopeful that that's part of HISA taking action and owners and trainers saying, okay, you know what, let's just retire this horse.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, you know, I can say that HISA has obviously been highly divisive here in the United States, and I don't really have a place to have an opinion about it. And I can say that I think if all else, we're going to get a lot of good information out of it because there is a lot more enforced reporting and a lot more data being gathered about the horses that are covered. So if, regardless of what your opinion is, we're going to have more information to go off of than we did 5 years ago. And that's never going to hurt a situation. That's only going to help us make better decisions. So I think from that perspective alone, it's been a good addition. Tracy in the Q&A it's a little bit more of a comment, and she said, Carrie brought up what I find to be a constant annoyance, the do-gooders. They often interrupt good rehoming situations. I've had several unpleasant experiences with them here in Texas. This is one of the things that I have on here is kind of how do you screen your adopters? How do you screen like their level of experience, and is the horse going to be appropriate for them? Each of you functions a little bit differently, and your ability to offer trial rides and to actually meet somebody in person is going to vary depending on what the situation is with the horse. And a tremendous amount of this happens online, sight unseen, through social media, and that happens day in, day out. Hundreds of horses are moving that way without issue. But can you tell me a little bit more about just kind of how you're screening your buyers and how you're determining that the home that you're placing them in is going to be an appropriate fit?
I can go first. Actually, something that I kind of implemented in the past couple years. One, because it helps me kind of keep track of the wait list that we do have. And because we don't post our horses anywhere, it's really just us going through a list to see what people are looking for. Do they want a trail horse or do they want an eventer? There are two very, very different horses. One needs to be very, very sound and very athletic, and one needs to be quiet. And maybe has some limitations, but that's okay. There's a place for all of them. So the application pretty much just obviously asks, where are you located? Because we have people from all over, and that is 1,000% okay. If they have experience with thoroughbreds and then with retraining off the track thoroughbreds, and then also kind of, again, what discipline they're looking for and just any other little background information they may have. We also kind of more so as like a second step would be asking for some type of reference. As I mentioned before, we do have a handful of people that I would say 70% of the time, people that we know and who have adopted horses from us before are probably going to adopt said horse. We just trust them and they get them started the right way. But there's also a handful of people that, it's their first time, and that is also okay. But we do try to, find a reference, and it's a very small industry and everyone knows everybody. So that's really the biggest thing. And then we are fortunate enough, all of our horses do come back to one central location. So we will always, meet the person, they get to meet the horse and just see how their personalities check out. And I will say, I've never had a bad experience in that way. And I think that our potential adopters, I've definitely had people come out and be like, this horse is not for me, whether he's just a little skittish when they walk in the gate and they're like, he jumped a little too fast, and they're like, I can already tell. And that's awesome. So I think that people also have a bit of sense. And, they want a forever partner as well as we want to find them a forever home.
So, a funny thing is I am not a rider. It's on my to-do list to take lessons and learn how to ride. But because of that, I surround myself with people who can help me with these decisions of where a horse should best be placed. I mean, I can review references, from veterinarians or trainers, but I also lean on other people to help me with matchmaking because they can see something with a different viewpoint than I can. So I give a lot of credit to people on my team who are the skilled horse people.
Yeah. There's something to be said for, surrounding yourself with people that, balance you out and offset your skills and all that sort of thing. So that's very wise on your part. Carrie, anything to add?
Well, like I said before, I have to rely on Katelyn she does most of, she is 99.99% of the placement. She's super savvy. She knows the race world. She knows the show hunter world. And it's just a perfect marriage between the two of us. She's really great and passionate, loves it. And I mean, actually, I got updated photos of one of our rehomies today. And so it's just something she absolutely loves. Sorry, my dog's going crazy because my husband's on the way to clinic because the mare's in surgery and we're going to hope for the best. So but I think it's kind of typical of like what all of our crazy lives are with horses. Yeah, that they're always around the corner, that there's going to be something that you have to deal with or manage or hope. And ultimately that all of us sitting here on this panel and all these people are watching we want to put the horse first and their care first. And that's ultimately what drives us completely. I know that for sure.
Carrie, the funny thing is, we have a mare that's all waxing up and it's been a few days and I was sure that my farm manager was going to call during this webinar to be like, foal's on the way. And I'd be like, yeah. I gotta go.
Yeah, I think we're definitely playing with fire, asking a bunch of people in the breeding industry to spend a February evening with us, but fingers crossed, we're rounding to home here. So one question that we have in the chat is from Neil, who is seeding a question here. He's our board chair. What can RRP do to help your organization safely retire horses? For RRP, we have a couple of different things that will directly facilitate that. We have horse listings on our website, which are free for anybody to use at any stage of their horse's life cycle. There's premium options as well, but we also have something that's fairly new and we're still trying to kind of push the visibility for it, and it's called a scholarship listing. So what that will do is if you have a horse that's retiring from racing and you would like to see that horse go to the Thoroughbred makeover, you can create the listing with us and pre-fund some of the horse's makeover expenses with us. So we will hold the funds in escrow, and then when the horse is ultimately entered in the makeover, we will credit the trainer back. So you get a little bit of security in knowing that that horse is kind of being guided in the direction of being with an approved makeover trainer, which I don't know that a lot of people always realize that our makeover trainers go through a pretty robust, rigorous application process, making sure that the people that are participating in this have an appropriate level of skill and experience to participate in the process. So that can just be an added layer of assurance. Another thing that we are seeing more and more of, and this is again because of the Thoroughbred makeover, is the scholarship listing is great in a one-off situation, but what we also see more of is breeders and syndicates and consigners that are offering their own incentives directly to makeover trainers to take their makeover eligible horses. So, offsetting, providing a travel stipend or covering some amount of the horse's fees. We've reached a point where RRP eligible moves horses. It's not going to move every single horse. It's not going to be the right solution for every single recently retired horse, but it definitely moves horses. And that kind of dovetails a little bit into the other question that we have here, is another international, thank you guys, all of you from down south, basically. And this one's coming from Victoria, Australia. Kara asks, do you feel there is enough shift in the equestrian community to take more off-track thoroughbreds, or is there more work required in this space, especially from racing operators, that will help grow demand for off-track thoroughbreds and in turn assist your rehoming efforts? For example, growing demand for off-track thoroughbreds through sponsorship and supporting off-track thoroughbreds only classes is a huge element to our off-track programs here in Victoria, Australia, and this can receive criticism and misunderstanding both inside the industry and externally by the equestrian community. That's a big question. But do any of you have an immediate answer? We might kind of break this down into a couple of little parts, but any immediate...
I personally do, because I deal with it so much with my daughter. First of all, we have to accept the fact that warm blood people are not thoroughbred people. Mm-hmm. And the show hunter world is very if we're being honest, very anti-thoroughbred for the most part. And I stopped trying to make non-thoroughbred people thoroughbred people, and instead embrace those warm blood people that want something a little bit more sophisticated or a little bit more challenging, or they don't have the same budget, because you can buy a heck of a nice thoroughbred going around a 2-6 course, swapping its leads and jumping great for $25,000. I know we sold a really nice Cairo Prince like that. My daughter showed. If that horse had been a warm blood, it would have brought $125,000. So I get to the point where I'm calling the thoroughbreds the poor man's warm blood, because, and then you go to these shows at WEC and you will see thoroughbreds. I can see them, and you'll go up to them and be like, is that a thoroughbred? And they're like, yes, see it. Yes, it is a thoroughbred. How did you know? And I'm like, and that's why they won't participate in the big thoroughbred classes that are at WEC. And because they don't want people to know, which is crazy to me. But anyway, the RRP and the TIP, for me, watching it over the years, has completely revolutionized the demand for thoroughbreds, because now I think you're creating your niche. People can make money, have fun, prize money, and then you're in that same community of all thoroughbred praising and loving people. And I know everyone sees these ads, in search of riding horse, no thoroughbreds, in search of riding horse, no thoroughbreds. And so instead of, I think we just have to try to get the thoroughbred enthusiasts more amped up and more reasons to buy, and bring their friends into the group, then we will ever change people that like going slow motion around a 3-6 course.
That's such a great answer, Carrie. I think I'm really interested, Kara, just to hear a little bit more about like what the criticism and misunderstanding is that people are putting out, as far as like, we're promoting the thoroughbred, we're having these thoroughbred only shows. Like, what is people's grief with that down there in Australia? I think, racing is huge down there. It's a big popular sport. The culture down there, from what I understand, is very different, and the attitude toward racing down there is very different than it is here in the US. So I'm just, maybe you can email me after the fact. We don't have to get into it too much here, but I'm just quite curious. I think, of course, you're touching on something that is, for me in my position, like, this is what we are really striving to do. And RRP sometimes can be in this interesting space, because like we said when we started out this session, is that aftercare doesn't have to be charitable. And in a lot of cases, it's not charitable. There's a lot of people that are operating completely outside of the scope of, traditional aftercare facilities. And there's a little bit of a dynamic in what's happened, and kind of like Carrie describes, like this is the poor man's thoroughbred, or the poor man's warm blood. And I think we're going to need a lot more information to overcome that stigma. Like, we've made progress. It costs more to acquire a recently retired thoroughbred, but it doesn't cost that hasn't translated over to the resale market. And so that's going to be the kind of like next frontier, is trying to get that resale price to come up a little bit more. And that is going to take a lot more information on just how influential the thoroughbred is in the equestrian community. And we just don't have a lot of good information on that. I'm hopeful that we'll get there. But it really, I always kind of laugh at the no thoroughbred ads, because it's always, they're willing to consider a warm blood that is probably like 3/4 or 7/8 thoroughbred anyway. But there's just that kind of disconnect there.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. If they are 80% thoroughbred and 20% warm blood, they are warm blood.
Yep.
They're never considered. We bred one like that, and I was like, that's kind of funny. Oh, it's a warm blood. People just look at it so differently, and but I think it's wonderful that you're kind of creating your own market. Creating now, the RRP makes it cool to have a thoroughbred, versus before it was like, ugh, let down. Now it's like, cool, you're in the RRP. Oh, awesome. So I really think that has, in the past decade, has changed the OTTB after training. I mean, I think it's revolutionized it myself.
Katelyn or Michele, Katelyn, you have completed the retired rate, or listen to me, the thoroughbred makeover when they get completed sometimes. Like, do you have anything to add about kind of what that experience was like for you, and kind of in the off-track thoroughbred community, like how influential RRP incentive programs, thoroughbred horse shows, like what does that look like from your perspective?
I think it's the greatest thing ever. I've been dreaming of doing the RRP since the beginning of it, quite literally. And last year was my first year doing it. Not my first year attending, but even, not competing in the RRP, just the atmosphere there. I mean, it's our kind of people. It's everyone who loves thoroughbreds, and they love them so much. And I think it's amazing. And Godolphin, we're very lucky. Our whole team, really cares about rehoming, but it's difficult for, the CEO to make it out to the shows and whatever. But the RRP, like, everyone talks about it. Everyone looks forward to it. Like, you'll see everyone, from the, the grooms to my bosses to everyone will be out there. And I think that's the recognition that it means. And I think that's the recognition that it brings. And as you mentioned, I think that, the RRP eligible label, it does move horses. I mean, people get excited about that. I think it's like a cool club to be a part of. And it gets horses started off in the right way. It's only, the start. It's like a stepping stone in the horse's long career. But it's something that makes you excited. It gets you excited for your fresh off the track thoroughbred. And every October you get to bring your horse there. And like, I didn't even jump in my class. Like, my horse was like, absolutely not, but I didn't care because I made it there. And it was amazing. You met some amazing people, and everyone. It's not, I showed horses growing up, and you never really met a nice person at a hunter jumper show. But at the RRP, like, people want to help you. They're like, oh, you can go in the ring first, or do you need me to set up the jump for you? And they're like getting off their horse to help you. It's amazing. It's just the coolest atmosphere, and it's the best community.
Thoroughbred people, not just our people. Michele, did you have anything to add? I've got one question here in the Q&A, and I know we should probably start winding down here. If anybody has anything else they want to ask, like, go ahead and slide that in.
No, I think that Carrie and Katelyn covered it really well. So if you want to get to your last question, I will cede my time.
All right. Madison asks, does anybody have any examples of times that racetracks themselves have been helpful or not in helping facilitate the retirement and rehoming of racehorses? I'll just toss out from the get that, and maybe this should be one of our sessions for Aftercare Industry Month next year, is to do all of the track-based programs. So there's actually quite a lot of track-based programs that function in a couple of different ways. There's Beyond the Wire here in Maryland, which has a horseman's representative that's employed by the Horsemen's or the Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association here in Maryland. And she facilitates getting the horses networked out. They work exclusively with TAA accredited facilities, but they have per start fees that help fund things. Maryland Jockey Club helps fund things. Like, it's really well organized here in Maryland. I'm sure, Michele, that you've dealt with Beyond the Wire. One of the kind of earliest iterations of that would probably be Turning for Home out of Parks. There's Karma that is out serving the California tracks. I could go on. There's quite a lot of them that are just very dedicated to either like a region or a particular a specific track or a group of tracks under the same ownership. First Racing has dedicated aftercare liaisons at the tracks that they own. I believe Churchill does as well. So it really varies. You know, there's quite a lot of variety in how each track is operated from a kind of corporate standpoint. So it kind of varies, but there are definitely a lot of great track-based programs that are out there right now. And if you guys have anything to add, please do.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I interview aftercare programs, and I truly did it for a means of getting their names out there and getting, some attention drawn to the great work they're doing. But what has happened through that is I've made these great connections with people. And so I can think specifically of the Finger Lakes Thoroughbred Adoption Program and Galloping Out, who I had horses running that were no longer ours at tracks there, and I was seeing them at the bottom levels. And I reached out to both of those programs and said, if I'm able to privately purchase this horse, can you help me retire them? And both of these programs guaranteed me that they would give me a stall. Wasabi Aftercare made a donation to their program, understanding, it's not free to take on a horse, but they were key to me being able to buy a horse, because the minute I tell a trainer or owner that I'm going to buy it, well, they almost instantly would like it out of their barn. And when they're up in the Finger Lakes and I'm here in Kentucky, that's hard to do. But because of these connections, I mean, these groups have been amazing with helping me facilitate these retirements.
Carrie, have you dealt with much with any of the track-based programs?
Nope, not at all. But I know they're out there, which is wonderful. But I haven't, and I think it would be really interesting to sit in and hear about all the different options. I've seen them, but I've never directly had any Mid-Atlantic Horse Rescue with Bev is the closest I had, and she's absolutely phenomenal and amazing and incredible in every way and an asset to our industry.
Yeah. She is a titan in the Mid-Atlantic here. She really just is just so good at what she does. Somewhat kind of related, like you kind of touched on it a little bit, Michele, with your answer, but what would you suggest to racing owners who don't have their own facility to turn out horses and assess them, but still want to set up their own management of the retirement of their horses? And Michele, you just even talked about it, how you kind of built this network and have been able to kind of facilitate transfer and stuff like that. Do you have anything that you want to add on to answer that question, or anything that either of the two of you want to add?
I think it comes down to monetary pieces too, right? Because to retire a horse, you do need to have some funding behind it. But if you're a syndicate or an ownership on your own, to plan a certain amount of money for when that horse's racing career ends, if they're still in your barn, and to set aside something for that. And then, yes, to network and make these sort of connections where maybe you don't have the facility to take that horse, but if you work in partnership with someone else, you might be able to make it happen.
Anything that either of you two want to add? All right, so I will end with a wrap-up question for each of you. If you had a peer or colleague in the industry that was considering setting up their own aftercare arm of their business, what would be your top suggestion for them?
However much space you think you need in land, double it.
Mhm.
And whatever your budget you think might be, triple it.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
I think that's so great. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect in people not realizing that the aftercare also costs a lot. Costs a lot to keep and raise and train racehorses, and it also costs a lot to get them transitioned too.
I would tell them that for me, organization is a key factor, you know, and that especially with what I do, where I'm actively seeking horses, right, to make sure that they're still racing or what they're doing, and that there will be moments of frustration where you don't know what has happened to this horse, but you can't let those be a roadblock, because there are so many amazing things that you find out about these horses that are now, you know, jumpers or trail riders or whatever they're doing, that makes up for the few that you're having difficulty getting, you know, a grasp on.
Katelyn?
I think my biggest thing on top of Carrie and Michele, because I think they had great advice as well, would be just to know the horse is just forever yours for its entire life. I think it's important to realize that it's a responsibility, even if you do rehome it when he's, if he does come back at 20. I think it's just always a responsibility that you have to take them back or find a different situation for them.
Okay. Well, thank you folks so much. You all were wonderful, and I'm so glad that we were able to spend some time kind of highlighting some of the great things that are happening within racing's own farms. If anybody has any questions, my email is kgreen@therrp.org, or if you reply to your Eventbrite confirmation, I will get those emails as well. So if you have any questions that you want to pass on or that I can pass on to our panelists here this evening, please do not hesitate. We look forward to seeing you for the remainder of Aftercare Industry Month. And Carrie, I hope that your mare is going to be okay.
Oh, thanks so much. My husband's on the way to check on her right now. Of course, she's due to full in 30 days. So,
Oh, okay. All right.
Welcome to horses. Thank you
Yep.
again so much for spotlighting everything and all you guys do too. I mean, it definitely takes a village when it comes to aftercare.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody. You guys have such a great evening. Thanks for your time.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Right. Take care. Bye.